When it comes to the Detroit Lions, there's always a need and there's always a desire to get more pressure on the quarterback. And this prospect could definitely be an answer to that problem. We're going to talk about it in today's episode, folks, so stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lion.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Lions fans, and just want to say welcome back to once again another episode from MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving on in. So, here's the thing, folks. When it has come to the majority of the topics that I've talked about leading into the draft, I have specifically really been hammering the whole thing about a cornerback because in my honest belief, again, I'm not an insider, I'm not saying that I know certain things, but it's my belief, it is my opinion that the Lions are going to go after a cornerback most likely in the first round. It's the highest position of priority that I can personally think of that the Lions would probably go after at pick number 29. However, though, that does not mean that that's what the Lions are going to do. That is merely my opinion. So, there are other positions that we are going to obviously talk about as we get closer and closer and closer to the draft. However, though, that does not necessarily mean we're always going to talk about necessarily a first-round draft pick prospect. Pardon me. Sometimes we're going to talk about other prospects that you could potentially get in maybe the second round, third round, or later rounds. And today's episode is going to be focusing on one of those players that we could get in the second round. So, when we think about it, for the majority of the offseason, a lot of Lions fans, a lot of analysts have consistently talked about that the Lions could potentially be going after, like I said, a cornerback. And they have talked about this time and time again. However, to a lot of Lions fans, to a lot of analysts as well, there is another position that is just as equally as important, and that's the edge rusher position. This position is one that Lions fans desperately want to have another dynamic and another explosive player added to pair opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. Now, I know this for a fact. Some people are going to be like, well, David, what about Betts? What about Houston? What about these other guys that we already have on the roster? I'm not saying those guys are going anywhere, but let's understand this. First and foremost, we don't even know if Betts is going to make the official roster. Right now, he's on the roster, but we don't know if he's going to make it past cuts or anything like that, so you can't bank on that. Second of all, we don't know if Houston is going to be able to fully come back from that injury, which pretty much took out his entire second year in the NFL. So again, you can't bank on that. He's got much more of a plausible aspect of possibly doing that than Betts, but again, neither of them are 100% assured things. So it's like, okay, maybe you'd like to improve, maybe you'd like to add more to that position. Now, when it comes to edge rushing prospects, I can tell you this right now. The biggest name that a lot of Lions fans have wanted to add during this pre-draft period has been either one of the Robinsons, either Chop Robinson or Darius Robinson. I've talked about both of them. I think that they're both really, really good prospects. I think Chop Robinson's a little bit better than Darius because of what he provides off the edge. But if you're looking for versatility, Darius is your better option because he can play both inside and outside. And again, both of those guys would make perfect sense for the Lions because they're versatile, they're explosive, and they have a great ability to get after the quarterback. However, the issue that I have is that I don't necessarily see either of those guys being available at pick number 29. Again, ever since Chop Robinson's, freaking combine, performance, he has literally gone up into like the teen area, and Darius Robinson's usually not that far behind him when it comes to these mock drafts. Now, I also know this. Mock drafts are definitely just a simulator. That does not mean anything when it gets to the real show. But again, for me, I just don't see a way that either of those two guys are going to be available at 29. So if Brad Holmes is desperately wanting one of those guys, he'd have to trade up. And I would imagine he'd have to trade up substantially, which I don't think a lot of Lions fans would want to do because it would really limit how many draft picks we could potentially have. So, this is where we start talking about other potential prospects because Just because those two aren't probably going to be available does not mean that there aren't other really good options that the Lions could get in their second round pick at number 61, which is at the bottom of the second round. The Lions, very recently, have had a pretty good string of finding good prospects in the second round. And I'm specifically talking about out of last year's draft in Sam Laporta and Brian Branch. Both of those guys were day one starters. Both of those guys were impact players, and they've done very, very well for the Lions so far, and I expect they will continue to do so. Now, the particular prospect that we're going to talk about in today's episode is interesting for two main reasons. One, this guy has shown in college that he can perform extremely well against top talent, but also number two, there's a familial aspect that ties him to the Lions, and that is specifically this prospect, and that is edge rusher Jonah Elliss. Now, for a lot of Lions fans, they'll instantly know exactly who I'm talking about, and they will understand exactly why this guy is an exciting, interesting prospect. And the main reason is because of the connection of his father to the Detroit Lions franchise. Jonah's father is former Lions player Luther Elliss. Luther Elliss was drafted in the first round by the Lions at pick number 20 coming out of Utah. If I recall correctly, he was drafted in 1995. Either way, first round draft pick for the Lions. Luther was known as pass rusher Luther. That was what he went by when he was playing with the Lions. And I would say this, for a good couple of years, Luther Elliss was a really good player for the Lions. He made 2 Pro Bowls for the Lions in 1999 and in 2000. So there's definitely some connection as far as Luther being a good player for the Lions and the fact that he played with the Lions primarily his entire career. So it's like, hey, now Luther's son, Jonah Elliss, is available to be drafted, and he is definitely an option for the Lions. Again, I know draft simulators are not reality, but if you think about it, according to the PFF mock draft simulator, Jonah Elliss is listed as a mid to late second round draft prospect. That puts Elliss very squarely in the sights of the Lions in the second round at pick 61. Now, the question really is this. If Elliss is there at pick number 61, and I do believe that he should at least have the potential to be there, is there a possibility that the Lions would pull the trigger on him? And for me, I definitely think there is a possibility that they could. And here's the reasons why. Let me explain. First, we have to take a look at the physical features that Jonah Elliss provides. He's listed currently, according to what he was at the Combine, as 6'2", weighing 248 pounds. The height is not the greatest. The problem here is more the weight. He's a little undersized in terms of his weight. He could stand to add about another 10 to 15 pounds. So that way, he could have more bulk, he could have more power, and that way he could have a better time setting the edge when it comes to the running game. So there are certain things as far as that's concerned he could stand to get a little better at. But the one thing about his physical component that is never in question is this guy's high motor. This guy is always running hot. He never quits on plays. That definitely falls right in line with what Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes want out of players. They want guys that do not need motivation to go out and do their jobs. They are always going to give their 100% effort every single play. Jonah Elliss falls right into that category. And again, another thing that is about this dude, now starting to get into the schematics point of it, this guy has violent hands. I mean, this dude uses his hands extremely well, which as an edge rusher is something you desperately need to do. You have to have the ability to use your hands, much kind of like a wrestler, in order to get the best advantage possible coming off the edge against tackles and whoever else. So, second, let's look at the college production for Jonah Elliss. If we take a look at what Jonah Elliss did in college, he spent all 3 years at Utah. Coincidentally, that was the same college that his father went to. Makes a lot of sense to me. When you take a look at his production from freshman year to sophomore year to junior year, all you're going to continue to see is continual progression. You're going to see him constantly get better and better. In his freshman year, he only recorded 2 sacks. His sophomore year, he recorded 4 sacks. And then in his junior year, he tripled that, and if I recall correctly, it was either 12 or 13 sacks. The point of the matter is every single year, he's getting better and better and better at what he does. And that is a really good sign to see out of a player because it means, okay, they're not plateauing. They're constantly getting better, which is something you want out of a player, out of a prospect. Now, in that junior year that I just talked about, where he had those 12 to 13 sacks. That was a great, great year for Jonah, because every single time that he had sacks, he was absolutely just killing people. And the best stretch that he had was when he was playing against some of the best talent that was available on the Utah, I don't know how you pronounce their last name. I think it's Utes or Utes, something like that, on Utah's schedule. I do apologize. And that was when they played against UCLA, Oregon State, California, and USC. Because between all 4 of those games, 3 of those games were ranked. UCLA was ranked at the time they played them. Oregon State was ranked at the time they played them. And USC was definitely ranked. So against all 3 of those teams, if you take a look at the stats, I think in that period of time, I think it was I think he had like 10 out of the 12 or 13 sacks that he had on that season. So just in those 4 games against some of the best talent that was in the country, he's going out there and he's performing absolutely lights out against these quality opponents. And again, you look further into PFF, you start going a little bit further down the rabbit hole. You take a look at Ellis in comparison to his peers. According to PFF, Ellis had a 90.1 pass rush grade. That was 8th best in the entire country. 8th best. So top 10 out of 160 other teams that are in the country. That is impressive as hell. Then you take a look at the sack total that I said. His 12 or 13 sacks tied for 6th most as well in the country. So top 10 in pass rush grade and top 10, almost top 5 in terms of the total amount of sacks he had in his junior year. What's my point? The point is, the guy can ball. The guy is a great player. He might be a little undersized, but you cannot, under any circumstance, doubt the guy's ability to play. All he really needs to do is put on a couple more pounds. He doesn't necessarily have to get taller. He just has to put on a little bit more weight. Now, this is why I say what I say. Take a look at these highlights against UCLA, Oregon State, California, USC. I'm going to start pulling them through right now. You take a look at what this guy's doing on the field. He is just making quarterbacks' lives absolutely a living hell. And you can see he's using different kinds of moves. He's using spin moves. He's using rip moves. He's using over the shoulder moves. Like, this guy has a very good repertoire of different kinds of pass rushing moves to get around players. And again, there are times where this dude has to go through 1 or 2, maybe sometimes 3 guys to get to the quarterback. What I'm trying to show here is, again, the internal motor, the tenacity that this guy has. I'm showing the fact that this guy is shifty. Again, when you can use both finesse and power to your advantage, that shows that you're not just a one-trick pony, which is something that you need at the next level. Because if you're just a power rusher or if you're just a finesse rusher, people are going to start to figure that out. You have to have a good mix of both. Otherwise, you're going to start getting keyed off on. So for me, Jonah Elliss having both of these things in his bag of tricks is something that I like to see. And then, for me, again, it would just be awesome for us to bring back Jonah Elliss to the Lions. Because again, Luther Ellis played for us for a long time. And for me, it's like there's nothing better than bringing back players that were from that 90s team. So that way they could come in, potentially talk to other players like, Megatron, Barry Sanders, and others that have really good relationships with the Lions. And so that way you could add yet again another layer of community, another layer of family to that Lions organization and make it more inclusive rather than what it was for a couple of decades exclusive. But my whole point is this, to kind of wrap this video up. When you look at Jonah Elliss, there is a lot to like about this guy. There is a lot to like about him as a prospect. And not only in the fact that this guy is tenacious and that he never quits, that attitude that he has, that I will do whatever I have to do to get after a guy, but also the connection, like I said, of his father already to the Lions. To me, it would just be a match made in heaven if the Lions would say, hey, we need another guy opposite of Aiden Hutchinson that will always bring his 100% effort. We need a guy that's tenacious. We need a guy that has the ability to do a multitude of things for us. I look at Jonah Elliss, and it's like, hey, if he's available there at pick 61, you jump on him immediately. Just do it. Don't even ask a second question why, because the guy personifies the type of player, the type of defensive player, and the type of player attitude that both Holmes and Campbell covet. He's tough, he's a hard worker, he's got a high, never-ending motor, and he's got a chip on his shoulder because, again, he's got something to prove. Because I guarantee you, I'm not the only person that's talked about the fact that he's a little bit on the small side for an edge rusher. I guarantee you he's heard it already. So yeah, he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. He's going to be like, okay, I got something to prove in the NFL. That's why I believe the Lions would love to have Jonah Elliss and the rest of the Elliss family have a connection to Detroit, and why I think the Lions would absolutely benefit from having him on their defense. But anyway, folks, just wanted to put this episode together really quickly. Didn't want to take a whole lot of time on it. Just wanted to present my thoughts and opinions to y'all. You guys decide if I'm making sense or not. But anyway, having said that, I'm going to end the episode here and say thank you all once again for watching another episode of Motor City Mania MCM. If you guys like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these 3 things: like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you've not yet had a chance to do so, again, please subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and I'm thankful for every single one that I can. But also, after you subscribe, if you so choose to do so, make sure you turn on that bell notification icon at the bottom so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. Again, subscription numbers, they're always going up, but we want to make sure you guys turn on the notification icon so that way as soon as I push something out, you guys can jump right back in. Also encourage y'all to share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook. Hell, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. The more we can share it, the greater the channel grows, the greater the channel spreads. And with that being said, to everybody, I hope y'all are having a blessed day. I hope y'all had a good day. I hope y'all are doing absolutely fantastic. Hope you have something that makes you smile. Hope you have something that makes you happy. And most of all, hope y'all enjoyed the content. And with that, God bless. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.